Let's pick up where we left off. And before we unpause, let's take a look through things and take stock, because last time we already missed a guild hall by virtue of not having enough value in it. And we're well on our way to missing the second one, I do believe. Those are caged animals that haven't had a chance to move to pasture yet. We're working on that. And we've finally started to get our pots cleaned up. Good, good, good. Need a bigger stockpile for furniture. Stuff for the mayor. And need to get the value up on the guild hall and barracks. Okay, so let's go take a look at our masons workshops, get them busy on some statues. We don't have any glass working yet, so that'll be the best we can do until we get metal or glass up and running. And armor stands and weapon racks. Now we've got enough masons that we should get some folks onto those jobs fairly quickly, get us some products kicked out, and get them installed. Okay, let's go on down here. We still need to get that bridge linked up, and we need to check to make sure that bridge is linked up. That's our bar block stockpile, I believe. Mechanisms, bedrooms that aren't quite done yet. And leather and cloth. And then we run out the bottom of the fortress at the present moment because we're not down to the caverns yet. All right. So first things first, the most important thing there, most important thing at the moment for me is getting that guild hall set up. Because we've already pissed some people off already. Hopefully not too terribly, but probably very terribly. And all of our masons are currently busy doing other jobs, like priestly stuff, which means we don't have enough. And no, I'm not choosing those folks because they're best. I'm choosing them because I need to start building up a pool of able-bodied men. We can't have... Sadly, I'm not trying to be sexist here, but Dwarf Fortress does not respect the notion of women in uniform very well. The women will happily carry their pregnant selves right onto the battlefield and pop a baby out right in the middle of the front line, and that's not a joke. They will happily then turn around and lose the baby, go mad, and spend some time beating things to death with it. In order to avoid that, I try to avoid having women as hunters or in the military, generally speaking. If I'm going to have a crossbow squad, it's not bad to put the women in there. Realistically, they're going to be firing from cover. Then, if they do happen to be carrying an infant at the time, I can always take them out beforehand. If they give birth in that rare circumstance, at least they have the benefit of the cover and they're not charging into melee. So, when I set my hunters up the other night, I pulled the woman who gave birth out and immediately put uh, these other folks back in to make sure I had a few of them. Which reminds me, I believe there was a stockpile we had not gotten to in the tanning section. Oh no, we did. We're good. Check on my settings here, make sure I've got, yeah, there's enough barrels. This one is the give. Okay, so we're starting to back up here because we don't have sufficient bags for the seeds, it'd be my guess. Okay, that'd be the problem. Bags for the seeds. So let's go downstairs and talk about cloth and leather because now's the time. We could get around this problem by dumping out some of our sandbags. But I really do intend to use the sand in the bags, and I don't really want to have to collect an extra round of it, and we're going to have to make bags long term anyway, so now's a real good time to do that. Let's just see if we've got enough leather to do all those bags. I doubt it, but if we can get a few, that'll be enough. Couple bags will allow us to start putting the seeds into those, and once that's done, yes, and the butchering begins anew. Sorry, riding herd on this one a little tight. The dwarves really don't like their stinky, rotting garbage. And we'll just kick off 50 rock pot jobs because I know we need some more pots to store seeds in. And we're definitely going to need them here in a second because we need food storage items for our brewing, see? Needs economic hard rock. You're telling me we've consumed every stone in the fortress. Really? Wow. Down to 208. But those may all be economic stones, that is to say, flux, coal, and ore, that kind of stuff, which don't count. I've told our dwarves very specifically not to count those. So we will need to excavate some additional space for them. Something to mine in. Control V lets me assign veins in DF hack. Basically, follow auto designating the tiles that would be revealed when the vein was dug out. So I can simply go to a piece of coal and tell it, hey, dig out this coal. And every time you find a new piece of coal, designate it. And there we go. Presto. Well, I say coal. That may not have been coal. Let me look at that. sphalerite, so it's zinc. Zinc ore. Now, since we're going to excavate all of that out, we'll go ahead and pull some room out here just for regular stone. Because our current woe is not the fact that we have sphalerite boulders. Welcome back, Clinidev. And now that they've spread that out, we should start to get, I hope, some of our miners busy. Got like 8 of them. Surely there's more than 2 or 3 on duty. Come on now. And that whistling will immediately stop because suddenly there's going to be non-economic stone in the fortress again. We're really going to work on those mugs. Welcome back, guys. And for those of you who've been waiting on the announcements, I apologize in advance. I had the announcement ready and forgot to actually go out there and click post. Got distracted by work. Hate it when that happens. Apparently, I completely forgot the one for day 3. I'm going to have to go back and put one in later. Remind me about that one, Clinidev. I want to put one out there in the Dwarf Fortress subreddit and just basically have it fall off the front page. Nobody needs to vote for it or anything. I just want to have it in the list of them so that people can page through them. And for those of you who would prefer to watch your video on YouTube rather than Twitch, you can catch the first 4 days being exported out there. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be done, but soonish. Wow, they are really going to town on that stone. Now, excavating this out does have a cost in terms of pathfinding. You'll notice I've only made one connection back to the fortress proper, and we will seal it up when the time comes so that nobody's pathfinding in this empty space over here anymore. We'll come in, we'll cut the rock out, we'll take our stuff, we'll go, we'll seal it back up so we don't have to deal with any pathfinding from it. I'm not sure if it's been fixed yet. Normally, I might suggest using a door, but the problem with doors and bridges is I don't believe the pathfinding actually checks them unless they are walls. So the bridges only count if they're up, and the doors don't count at all. So animals would, for example, try to pathfind into that space and treat the door like it wasn't there. Not sure if that's been fixed yet. Okay, and now we've got good stone going on here. At least for a second. Need to check to make sure that they are, yeah, see, they're not getting the skins out in time, so something's not going right there. This is what you got to watch out for when you're doing a big butchering run. It'll be this stuff that gets you. Okay, hopefully with those dumped, somebody will come along and grab them very quickly, and they won't actually begin to stink to joint up. Catch them early, catch them often, don't have a problem. All right. Now we need to trim this back and put the walls up so we can make this a proper pasture space. Our raw food stockpiles are abundant. Is that just raw food? I need to check. It's also including drinks and prepared food, none of which should be in this stockpile. So let's get rid of those. This should be prepared food. And that's drinks. Make sure there's barrel quantities on both. And set them, since they are only their own type of food, we can set them safely to take from this other stockpile and not cause a problem, because they will only take those things which they are supposed to have. That will produce a big run of people moving stuff around, I suspect, giving us more room to put our raw food where it belongs. Because we've got a lot of drinks. And now that they have bags, they've cleared up the seed pile here. So our seeds are back to being under control. Still need to dig out the pasture space, the raw food stockpile. Notice how much more empty it is now. There was a lot of drinks clogging it up. In fact, this is actually... Oh, no, because I got to fill the corners in if we want to make it look nice. Not sure what I selected there, but apparently it is the right color, or is the right thing, so off they go. Get that filled in so it looks right. Oh, another possession. Bummer. Not actually going to use any of those things for anything, but this is our barracks, and it needs something to be designated from, and a rack or a stand works pretty good for that. Sorry, wanted to make sure that they hadn't added an option when I was looking for something else. Uh-oh. He is not going to a station. That means we don't have the workstation he requires. Now, there's a couple ways you could do this. You can figure out who he is. He's Tekud Lezadil, a crafter in ceramics. We don't have a ceramics workshop, so that's a pretty safe bet that he's looking for one of those. Failing that, though, DF Hack does have a couple of tools, or you could. So let's say we didn't have him named. Maybe he was a new migrant. We don't even know what his role is. Maybe he's a farmer. You could come out to Therapist and find his name. And since I happen to know he's a ceramics guy, we can look him up here. Here's Tech. Make sure we get a fresh read. And Dwarf Therapist will identify him for you here because he has this special job. Plant Mood Glassmaker. So it treats that as a sort of subdivision of farming. Isn't that interesting? It's all right. So Tekud here needs a ceramics workstation, a kiln, basically. And as it happens, I had already designated this area to be made into a forge. We'll start with plain forges, and later on we'll turn this into a magma forge, storing... Oh, didn't realize I dug that out. Is this the one I meant to use? No, that's the hospital. No, that is the one I meant to use, and we dug out underneath it. Oh, no, we didn't. There we go. Helps if I'm going the right way. There we go. Yes. So, I didn't do it wrong. Good. Let's do it right. The goal here is we'll turn this into a forge area. Later, we'll use mine carts to move magma up here and pour it into holes in order to have our magma forges right here in the middle of our workshops. You could build down at the magma sea, you could embark on a volcano, but what if I told you it's possible to move the magma sea where you want it? Oh, forge, duh, I'm getting old. Holy cow. Helps if we hit the right keys. There we go. Much better. I don't believe we actually have a second anvil, so one of these may not get done, but that's okay. As long as I have the one, we'll be in good shape. And I need to check to make sure we've got some folks who actually have the jobs necessary to do this, which is things like glass making and ceramics and architecture, masonry. So we need to make sure that these jobs get actually queued up and started here and that people actually build them. There we go. Tekud's got his thing. Now, do we have what Tekud needs? He's off to the races. He's got himself some gems, it looks like. And then he's going to complain we don't have... Nope, there he goes. The odd off-centering issue there that happens periodically is a side effect of something in our uh, tile set modification here. Not the graphics set, but the actual text will be text, I believe. Possibly Dwarf Fortress itself. Still not enough rock to keep people busy. Holy cow. Fine. Dig a trench. Dig the trench. I can afford to give him one level to mess around with. While we're at it, let's dig out something we do need. Let's build an archery range. Now what's going to happen here is our dwarves will line up at this north end and they will fire to the south where we'll have a bunch of archery targets standing up on these raised platforms. Now the gaps between them are intended to save on ammunition. See, when ammunition hits the ground or a wall or uh, a target, it has a tendency to break. If, however, it hits the ground and the ground isn't actually ground but an opening leading to empty space below, the game drops the item intact from that point to the ground and does not destroy it. This allows us to save ourselves some ammunition when a bunch of unskilled dwarves are firing it randomly at walls. What we'll end up with is dwarves standing in our archery range, firing south at the targets. Targets that hit, great. They'll save. They'll earn their XP. But sometimes they'll miss to the left or to the right, and when they do, that one will end up in the hole. It'll fall to the ground intact and forbidden, where we can come back later and collect them en masse. Now, these outer ones are specifically to act as gutters, basically, for that last guy on the row. So he's got two gutters instead of just one. But a squad, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some random guy could all be in here at once. And as a side effect, this will produce a lot of raw stone, which apparently we're in dire, dire need of. There we go. It's probably the mugs, if I had to guess, since we're using those as a primary trade good at this current moment. Plus, you have to have some in your tavern. I don't know if I mentioned it when I was setting it up the other night, because I did it in such a hurry. But in addition to the tables, we set up some containers, and then we told the location to uh, the tavern, to actually have 100 goblets desired. There are currently 100 stored, and 20 instruments so that folks can play the instruments. But we don't have any instruments yet, so we need to do that. Instruments is one of those things that you can export, but once you have the necessary materials to do so, it's not all that hard to set it up. We are currently still getting our industries set up, so we're not ready to do all of them, but we could. Oh, there's a way to do that. Hang on a minute. Oh, right. So we can make a note of which instruments have parts, and we can make them. We can set up jobs for each one of these to make, say, 20 of them anytime we have less than, say, 50. That'll give us some for export, where we can export the cheap ones and keep the best ones for our tavern. So let's start with the Thultig. The Thultig actually has more parts than just the keyboard. It has a body and a bellows, and it then has to be assembled. So make a Thultig keyboard. Let's make 5 of them. Anytime there's less than 10, we'll make some keyboards. We'll keep a few extras on hand. They're made out of rock. Problem solved. Voltic bodies are forged, so they're going to be made out of metal. Keeping at least 10 here means that we won't use up our last metal making Voltigs. We'll stop if there's fewer than 10 left, and we won't do it. The idea being that we can reserve, we hope, our last few bars to make a few more coins and thereby start the virtuous cycle again. Voltig bellows takes tanned hides, leather. No problem there. That means we will try to keep on hand 30 Voltigs, which we make 5 at a time so we don't burden the system too much. The goal being that we crank out 30 and we'll be somewhere between 30 and 35, depending on how that all falls out. And at that point, they'll stop. And we can keep the good ones, sell down the crummy ones. The crummy ones will be replaced. And so over time, we'll end up with 30 really good full tigs, some of which will be kept in the tavern, some of which will be in our stockpiles. The Decis is next on our list. Starting to think that that's ore, perhaps, or clay, maybe? Can you only make a Decis case out of clay? I'll have to look. And Decis strings take silk, so maybe you don't make more than 5 of those at a time. So now we'll check another one. The Rakir is next. Or maybe that's a Riker. I think this is a flute. If that's the case, that would be really bad. No, it's a string instrument. Thankfully, nobody's playing the Riker. Dudgoth. And the ist bar. Bear with me. I'm going back up through here, make sure I don't have any duplicates. Thultig keyboard bodies bellows assemble. Case strings keyboard assemble. Body strings plectrum assemble. Drum head mallets assemble. Triangle mallets assemble. Okay, we're good. It's interesting to note that the ist bar is a glass triangle played with a mallet made of stone. A glass triangle played with a stone mallet. Green glass ist bar triangle. Now that gives us all the ones that have to be assembled, but some instruments are single piece, and single piece instruments we can just go ahead and have them produce. And the uvash is the only one that actually has to be done at this point because we have the Thultig, Desis, Riker, Dudgoff, and Istbar already queued up. So just the uvash needs to be done here. And we'll, as with the others, the final instrument needs to be about 30 so we can get rid of the junk ones and keep the best. And this is probably going to be what stocks our tavern initially. And so we'll give ourselves some additional chests there. If we're going to store 30 instruments of each type, we need to make sure we have plenty of storage room in our chests, and then we will set the tavern to house a lot more instruments than it does currently. "30 instruments, and I think there were 6 types, so we'll just store all 180 of them in here. They probably won't actually get that high. We'll be selling them off, etc., but have at it. They can store every instrument they build. I'm good with that. Now, I think for next time we may experiment with this a bit. I may want to try and put private versions of these rooms inside, and the problem is that there's enough travel space here in order to guarantee safety to the call them the dwarf only spaces. That it's add another 20 steps there and back for every task, or 30 steps there and back for every task that involves these public spaces. And dwarves do them a lot nowadays. Oh, he couldn't store the rock because somebody dug out the dirt he was standing on. Well, don't do that. Problem solved. Now let's see them use all my stone. They will. May take them a minute, but they'll get there. The good news is this is 2 levels of stone and ore all at once, basically dumped into one big pile for them to piece through. Okay. Okay, now we need to continue our plunge down towards the magma sea. We'll relocate our staircase here a little bit so that we are positioned over a column of rock and can continue downward. Sorry, when it goes to save, people tell me it cuts out. All of the recordings for all of the days that I do for all of this entire charity event will go up on my YouTube channel. The days we have done already should be visible here on Twitch until 14 days after their initial broadcast, because that's when Twitch gets rid of them. I'd keep them out there indefinitely, but Twitch won't. At that point, they'll all have been uploaded to YouTube before their 14-day window. So I can't say exactly when that will happen, how many days afterwards. It's when I get around to it. But you should be able to watch them on Twitch up until that point, and they should be on YouTube after that. Are my past broadcasts out there and visible for you? Hey, if you've got questions, feel free to ask. That's what we're here for. Well, that's part of what we're here for. The other part, of course, is that banner down there at the bottom left corner. And we really need to look at putting a restrict on that, but I'll get to that in a minute. We don't have a lot of people doing a lot of surface work at the moment. I need to get rid of that one ramp right there that was from that one tile that was late. And all of these tiles that hadn't gotten dug when we initially did it. There we go. Now, if anybody goes into the moat for whatever reason, they have to walk around to the front where the drawbridge is, and where theoretically we'll have a bunch of guys standing up top shooting down at them with arrows. Well, crossbow bolts, but the principle's the same. Okay. And remember, kids, when it comes to excavating your fortress, if anybody asks you whether there's room for pudding, tell them hell no. Okay, good for that. So let's talk about a problem we haven't fixed yet. First off, let's get that hotkey fixed because that's the last time I'm going to zoom to the wagon when I don't mean to. Um, let's zoom that bad boy right there. Yeah, that's much better. Stop popping up to the wagon. Speaking of which, let's get rid of the wagon. What's in the wagon, just to make sure? Logs. Logs in the wagon. Pretty sure we're not going to need those here. Okay, wagon gone. Now, it's worth noting that if you find yourself in a pinch for wood, you can get 3 logs out of the wagon. Now, those can be used for building materials or burning the charcoal to get your cycle started if you screwed up and forgot to bring your coke with you. But the catch is, if you use all 3 of those and you still don't have a way to get wood, you're going to be screwed. Now, our dwarves are going to finish out this ceiling here. When they do, I will replace this ramp here with a wall. And then we're going to have to deal with a problem. In fact, we can deal with that problem right now, in fact. So this is an evil, shameful, dirty, exploitative hack that I highly recommend to all players of Dwarf Fortress, and it's called Tree Begone, or Landscape Cloth, or I don't want to be fucked to build a stone floor everywhere I go. And it works like this: you get a stockpile setting, custom stockpile, and then you go to custom settings and you say, I don't want anything. Disable it all, block it all of it gone. Nada. Nothing. Nothing in this stockpile. And you're going to ask me, well, what good is a stockpile that doesn't store anything? And the answer is, it's all kinds of good at keeping trees from growing. Now, these last few tiles back here are actually pond tiles, which won't grow trees normally. There's a couple ways I could get rid of them if I really had to have uniformity of my stockpiles here, and the easiest way would be to build a dirt road over them all, which will convert them back to their regular soil, and when the dirt road naturally is built, it doesn't actually block construction, so as soon as the dirt road is constructed, you could simply build over it. Now, I don't care. As long as those tiles remain not things that will produce trees, they're fine. They're perfect for my purposes. But since there's a stockpile here, no more trees. That's not exactly perfect. We actually had one tree that got sprouted right here. See it right there? It grew on a tile right outside our fortress, which is kind of problematic actually, because now the damn thing is growing on the middle of a column of dirt and nobody can actually cut it. That's kind of an issue. And ordinarily, I'd do something crazy like, I don't know, just dig the dirt out, let it collapse on whatever dumbass was, good enough to do that. But if you want to do this safely, you can't simply build a floor over to it, because when you fell the trees, the logs will punch the hole in the floor and drop whoever's on this floor into the hole. That's no good. So to fix it, we actually have to build 2 sections of wall here. Wall, which they can then walk on as they get out to cut the tree. Once the tree is cut, we can dig out this dirt. Once the dirt's gone, we can remove these 2 pieces of wall and put back the stockpile in that section. And that will end this saga of tree growth. Now, this other area underneath our area here will be fine. No trees will grow because they won't have any room on that 1 story tall box we're calling a surface pasture here. I like to envision the flooring on the level above this as being a sort of very elegant grate with very small holes. You know, the kind of small holes that let light in, but not water. Maybe stone thinned down to such a layer that's to such a degree that it actually is translucent. They're trying to get our ceiling built, and the giant wrens continue to fall. Speaking of which, let's check. Did we set up a bolts job? Nope. No, we did not. Don't think I can do it that way. Think that works. Because all of the wood objects are plants, and therefore this is a bolt made out of a plant trait material. I think we'll have to keep an eye on it. Well, it's not a material. Not sure we can do bone here. Oh, well, there's bone in the list. Don't remember that being there before, but we'll take it. Did we add wood to the list too? No. So wood is not a trait. And I don't want to specify the different types of wood because that will not work the way we want it to. And this is the specific material, so that's not going to help us here. No, I'm pretty sure that's the best we can get at the moment. Let's see if that works. If we end up with some wooden bolts being made, it's working. Could not find path. That means you were lazy or you were stuck in a tree because there's definitely a path home. Couldn't find path from this gentle sloping hillside. One level up and what? half a map width to the fortress, and he couldn't find a path. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, maybe the... Actually, wait. Maybe the problem isn't him. Wait. Maybe the problem isn't him. Maybe the problem... Sorry, I had the sudden notion that maybe the wren might have fallen out of the sky and landed on top of a tree. Like right there, for example. Maybe it isn't him. Well, that's not going to work. Pretty sure we've got at least one person with an axe set to cut trees, don't we? If we don't, we're going to have... Might as well be, though. At least I can trust the cats to kill vermin. Not sure we can trust the dwarves to do anything. Yes, we definitely have wood cutting on at least one dwarf. Good. Well, when they cut that tree, they'll get an additional surprise. The giant wren corpse will fall out of the sky, and if it hasn't rotted by then, I'm hoping that they will deliver it to something useful like the stockpiles where it can be butchered. Let the elves go set up, and we'll take everything they own. Our floor is almost finished. I don't literally mean take in this case. I literally just mean sell our junk and take their stuff. Oh, that reminds me. We should now have, now that I'm thinking about it, we have sunberries and rope reeds, and by now we've probably brewed one or both of them. If he's standing in the meeting hall, and assuming he hasn't been standing there for a really long time at this point, then the answer is you're missing the workshop. You need to figure out what he needs. Now, there's a couple ways we could do that. I talked about one. You could simply look at his job if you've sorted him correctly, and you can look in Dwarf Therapist, and it lists him there. But there's another way you can tell, besides going through Dwarf Fortress's horrific labor menus and figuring out what he's actually skilled at, and that's you can use DF Hack's Show Mood tool. If you're running DF Hack because you picked up the starter kit like a smart netizen, pop out there into DF Hack, type in Show Mood, and whatever the active artifact mood is will be displayed along with all of the items that the individual requires and which ones he has collected to date. You can then figure out exactly which workshop you need, exactly what materials he's going to want, and you can go ahead and get everything ready. And you don't have to deal with the, let's call it, fun interface of figuring out what your dwarf wants. But no, if they're not in a workshop, it's because you don't have the workshop. Now, of course, if you let them stand there long enough, they're not in the workshop because they've gone mad, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, let's take a look at our levers. Okay, and I need to check. DF hack is definitely the easiest way to do it, because it is explicit about what you're going to want and need. Uh, and for new players, if you're having trouble figuring out what the, let's call them, enjoyable translations are for what a dwarf wants, when he starts talking about plant life, what he's not talking about is plump helmets. What he really wants is logs. Um, when they talk about gems shining, I don't remember if that's cut gems or rough gems, but you'll want some of both. So none of our well bridges here have been linked up properly. Let's go ahead and get that solved. Actually, I don't think either one of those is a flood warning. If I've done this properly, the well is incapable of flooding, but it does allow intruders on the front one theoretically if it's hooked up, so I need to make a note of that. As you've noticed, bridges have a tendency to have warnings attached to them since there's a somewhat of a disconnect between the guy operating the lever and the thing being operated upon. Now, as I recall, these are elves, so we'll want to make sure we don't sell them the bins by mistake. And I don't think we have anything else we care about giving them. All our crafts are in the finished good bin, so that can go too. And now a giant flood of dwarven labor, as they rip every mug out of the tavern and deliver it to the depot to possibly sell it. On the plus side, you'll know that you're going to get a clean mug because we're making new ones all the time. I can just see some dwarven guy telling the trader, "Yeah, that right there, that's a brand new pristine mug. Only used 700 times in the tavern before we brought it over to you." What do you give me for it? And he's on his way to trade, it says, so that's good. Here come all the bins. That's what these brown squares are being moved. All those heavy stone mugs and trinkets. Now, chances are real good we're not actually going to need all of this stuff to buy whatever it is we want because they're not going to have everything we want to sell anyway. But let's see what they're going to give us. Fire clay I'll take. Now, cages. Doesn't hurt to have a few. The cheap ones with no decorations are great. Nice and cheap. I don't normally make barrels, but I'll happily buy a few along the way just to have a few. And then we're down here to clothing, and I don't care about their clothing. I'll make my own, which we're going to do here shortly, I might note. Not a lot of good stuff here. Some acorns and bayberries and pears and lychees and cherries and coconuts and citrons and other fruit-related stuff. And then some cheapish instrument parts. And a whopping 328 dwarf bucks. Wow, you guys have brought us the good stuff this time, didn't you? But there's nobody in any of these cages. They're all empty. I mean, I need a couple of empty cages, but not, like bushels of them. And we'll give them a few bonus goodies in the hopes that next year they'll actually bother to make an effort. A few masterwork mugs goes a long way. Now, we don't want any of this stuff left here anymore, so anything that's actually still trading, let's just go ahead and untrade it. No point in bringing the stuff if we're done. Tell the trader he's no longer required. We're done with the elves. The end. Mugs will be delivered back to the tavern. The elves will go on their way with our refuse, and we now have a few more jobs to cook up. Now, this may cause us some really annoying failure notices if we don't have this stuff, but if we get down to the point where we can't make coins, I want to know about it because we're really low on some of the metal that I am trying to keep building up. That's like an emergency notification that we've effectively run out of some sort of metal if we can no longer make coins from it. Oh, I know something I didn't do when that I normally would have. Let's talk about geology for a moment. So hang on a minute. Let's go back up to the surface. I usually do this on day one before we even start the fortress, but we got so tied up with that aquifer, I got totally distracted. So let's take a look at a DF hack tool that is going to help me out here. And this is going to basically remove the fog of war underground for a moment. Now I don't play with it off. I don't find that enjoyable, but I think it's very useful for new players to have an idea how things are laid out underground. Now notice I've got the map paused at the moment, and I'm not planning to unpause it. There's a very good reason for that. It's so that I can look at things now. So let's talk about what we're seeing here. Since we've removed the fog of war, let's go back up. So we're on the surface. We're going down. These are tree roots in white and brown with a sand, and this is a pond right here that's been leaves have fallen over it, but it's frozen. Now, as we go down, you'll see the different biomes actually have their different soil types take over. So as we dive down in this area, you'll see that the tiles are a little out of sync, and what's happening here is that these two biomes have different soil types in them, and they don't line up one to one exactly. There's some deviation between them, at least at some levels. Yes. Now, once we get down, this is still all soil. You can tell because there's no inclusions here. It's all just dirt, no gems or the like. The moment we hit the stone layers, you can tell because it's far more interesting. You've got pockets of gems. There's a vein of materials running right through here, if you can see it here and here. Let's see. There's a cluster of stone, of a particular type of stone here. I don't know what these are. I could look at them, but I'm not worried about that just yet. And as I go down even further, you'll see different types of stone. This is a microcline, I'm sure, by color. It's the only thing that has that really light blue color, as I recall. And it forms in clusters very commonly. Now, these veins might be sphalerite or iron, or they could be anything. I don't know. Now, as we dive down through it, you'll see different types of stone. But let me zoom out for a moment to kind of give you an idea overall. Now, remember, when we embarked originally, we embarked in a 4x4 embark. We didn't really talk about what that means, but this is a great time to talk about it. You'll notice there are 4 clusters, 4 clusters in each dimension. And that's very, very specific. There's a reason. We embarked in a 4x4 embark, and each layer gets its own chunk of veins and its own chunk of cluster, if there is one. Sometimes there's not a cluster, so there's a cluster here, but not here, but there's still veins in all 4 tiles, yeah? So when you know how this is laid out, that is to say, if you imagine a square drawn around this and a square drawn around here, that there's going to be a vein intersecting roughly somewhere in the middle of each one of those tiles, it gives you an idea where to aim your digging when you're doing your mining. Now, I don't know which of these are valuable minerals and which aren't. And as we dive down through here, you're going to see here's where our bedrooms are. You can see the stone we're digging through. And then we get down to where the caverns are. Now, this is what the caverns look like if you have the lights on, so to speak. They're spread out and they start on this level, but then they have multiple heights. So there's and then we faded out through cavern 1 and we're at the bottom of cavern 1. And out the bottom side of cavern 1, we're going down through here. You can see that this stone fades out and this is some sort of metamorphic stone with no more of the clusters anymore. Back to a different stone, again with the clusters. We keep going down, keep going down, keep going down. And we run into the second cavern. There's some water down here at the bottom. There's an open hole here, and this is going to be a shaft, a pipe, or a magma tube, or a chasm that leads down to the next cavern, and it actually will go all the way down. In fact, you can actually see up here, it looks like in addition to this chasm, if you look at the top right up here, there's actually another cavern connection here where it's level by level diving down through the ground to reach down to the next cavern. So there's a cave that connects both of those. So our cavern 2 and cavern 3 are connected. And as we arrive here in the bottom, you can see there it comes out right there is where cavern 1 comes out. And this hole bottoms out right here in the cave. Now there's some blackened sections here. You'll notice that it like blocks out certain sections of the map. It hides them from me. That's because these are the adamantine spires, and I did not do reveal hell, I think it is, to show me the demons and all. I don't need that. I know that there's a spire there, that's all. So there's some really valuable stone in those areas right there that's come up, and it's got to be kind of maybe down here because of the weirdness where it doesn't know exactly which tiles to block. So there's definitely some uh, edge cases where it kind of branches over a little bit. In fact, there's extra spires. When I hit here, there's going to be a spire here and a spire here and 2 spires there. So about 4 spires total. And then, so now at the bottom of the world, we're below cavern 3. This is the magma sea, this red section here. Molten fluid magma that could be pumped. Now, as we keep diving down, you'll see the magma sea gets very large, but then there's these intrusions of this other material. And this other material is semi-molten rock. And semi-molten rock will come to fill up the entire map chunk except where those spires are. The spires are the only way through the semi-molten rock. And then below the semi-molten rock would be where the bad things live. There's a couple levels down there for them. If you drop something into semi-molten rock, it is gone. Unlike magma, which can burn an artifact forever but never destroy it, semi-molten rock don't give a fuck. It eats everything. A garbage dump over semi-molten rock never produces miasma because nothing survives long enough to actually produce it. Semi-molten rock cannot be pumped. It is semi-molten in the sense that it is hard and represents a literal barrier between the world proper and the underworld. Now, if you're looking to penetrate that, find your nearest adamantine spire and start digging. You'll get there soon enough. If you're looking to avoid it carefully, however, that's our staircase. So we know that, interestingly enough, in the vein of not cheating here, we were going to find out one way or the other anyway. Our staircase actually penetrates down to where it hits the caves, so we will definitely find cavern 2 before we run that staircase that we created dry. Once the dwarves start digging it out, which they haven't actually done yet. They're kind of getting pokey about it. Now, I have not unpaused the game because I don't want to miss out on any notifications that come when the game discovers certain terrain features underground, like adamantine or that chasm. So while the game is paused, nobody can discover those things, and we're good. I can unreveal the map, and the problem goes away. Reveals makes the map go away. If you somehow get this bugged, that is to say, you screwed up somewhere, you can try to unreveal the whole map, go up to the top up here in the open space, way up at the top, and type rev flood, which does a reveal flood fill of the map to determine which tiles can be seen and which cannot. And sometimes that will help you fix your problem, but not always. So don't run the game revealed and unpause unless you mean to do it. It's worth noting that one of those notifications in particular is the notification about having discovered the caverns. If you don't discover the caverns, you don't get any cave moss. Now, like I said, I turned that off, but I think it's useful for new players to understand why you dig the way you do when you start mining. Now, in this case, where I'm just doing this bulk mine here, this is purely for stone, and at that point, it doesn't matter what pattern you use, you want it all. I promise you, it has not been months since you've seen this fortress. If you saw this fortress before October 1st, you, sir, are a time traveler. And I want my $5 back. But it may have been almost a year since you last saw this broadcast, since I only do it once a year. Well, once being 1 month and a week a year. So tell me, photo number, do you have any questions I might be able to answer for you? Check on our... Ah, there's a real good reason for that. I wouldn't say I was hidebound or that I make my fortresses all look very similar, but there's a definite, distinct pattern to them because it's a very efficient, effective pattern in general. It's not the only way you could do it, but it is certainly a way you could do it. And every time I find something better, I try to adopt it. But generally speaking, modifications from this point are going to primarily be those of aesthetic nature. The answer, photo Numbra, is we are actually out of stone. We have used it all. Like our dwarves have used every non-economic stone in the fortress. We have used it all. Um, we are literally doing a bulk stone quarry to generate non-economic stone for blocks and for statues and trinkets. You give a group of dwarves the hauling labor, give them a stone stockpile to fill up, give your masons and stone workers instructions to use from that stone. See, you say that. You say preposterous, but now I feel obligated to defend my honor here. I really do. I feel obligated to defend the fact that I'm doing this for a reason. Needs non-economic hard rock. And they ain't talking about rock and roll. You can run out of stone. I have demonstrated it. Now, what it really is we have a couple of super high skilled, super, like legendary high skilled stone carvers who are absolutely just going rip shit hellbent for election on our stone stockpile. Uh, we have 3 dwarves with wheelbarrows servicing the crafts dwarves, and the only stone. See, this is a stone stockpile. This is a stone stockpile right here. Okay, and these are the stones that have not yet been consumed. Some of those, like these round ones, are ores, and they are actually just in the wrong place. They just won't get picked up until I have a stockpile that takes them. So they're in the wrong place. Not all of the stone that's still in this stockpile can actually be used for the jobs in it. Um, Likewise, this is our mason's workshop, and this is non-economic stone. So we have consumed almost all the stone in our stockpiles, despite having this giant 2 layers of stone that we've now, mostly dug out in this chunk here. This is the Vetlinger tile set. If you're using the Dwarf Fortress starter kit, I highly recommend it for you folks with larger monitors. It might be a little small for you viewers. The reason I use it, let's talk about that for a moment, since I talked about it briefly on the first day and then not again since. The reason I like it is if you're playing on a really big monitor, you can theoretically have all of that display detail and still maintain your view distance. Now, my monitor is only sadly 19 by 20, 1920 by 1080, so I don't get the full benefit of it. I can't see all of the detail quite to this degree, but I can zoom out quite a ways and retain the important detail down to the degree of the level that I would have used with Phoebus. Now, on my older monitor, I would have used the 16x tile set because I need the greater clarity of the simpler tile set on the smaller resolution. Boy, bay. And see, I am building above ground. We do a build above ground. We have this little. Oh, in fact, I need to replace that ramp now that we're done. We do have this box comprised of stone on the surface for that purpose. That's, you know, we have a stone box, but that was blocks, and blocks is really probably what's using up most of my stone. Blocks and crafts. It's not arts and crafts, it's blocks and crafts. Let's see, blocks. So yeah, we had 1,000+ blocks we've got floating around here somewhere, and we've consumed most of them already. Stones, we have only 1,000 stones currently not used somewhere. That's everything I've dug out in that giant pit, and a lot of those are, if you look over here, limonite, silver nuggets, galena, sphalerite, cassiterite, tetrahedrite, horn silver, gypsum, fire clay are all economic. It's the schist, firelite, conglomerate, and microcline mica here that are our big contributors, mostly the schist, because that's the level I'm digging out. Yeah, I don't use raw stone if I can avoid it. Raw stone, I like the look of rough carved stone, make no mistake, but the problem I have with rough stone for Dwarf Fortress is manifold. And the primary issue is climbers. Give me just a second here, guys. Rock blocks are okay, so the best thing against climbers is an overhang. Nobody goes up an overhang. You can't climb the underside of the overhangs. The game does not actually allow that kind of work. Floors are always on the level above you, and if you're underneath them, the floor above you does not exist. So typically I do care about doing one type of stone, but we ran out of conglomerate and I didn't want to wait on more to be made. So I need this up. I need it up now. Rainbow colored it shall be. I don't give a rat's butt. It's not what I prefer, but when it comes to getting your dwarves in and sealed, I can always come back and make this pretty later if I want. Pull the old stone out, put new stone back in. Done. If that's really my primary concern. Um, but it's not. Not now. Not yet. We are so far behind because we had to dig through that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layer aquifer, and we really can't use this layer because it'll drip from above. So the non-usable layers are like 9 layers of stone and dirt. We had to dig out and seal off at the very beginning of the fortress just to keep these light, and these are light aquifers that were flooding the fortress. Um, just by virtue of their number and size. Pretty aggressive for light aquifers. I'm hoping we can use them to fill our well. Okay, so they can go on their merry way. They've got their business handled. We've got that getting linked up, and it doesn't look like we've got to worry about a flood just yet. So let's see if the light aquifer can actually hack this or not. And we'll let them connect the aquifer. And we're good and linked up. So, dirty little secret, Photonumbra. Dirty little secret of Dwarf Fortress. I have 8 5x5 farm plots. Using these 8 5x5 farm plots, if I had 8 reasonably skilled miners or farmers to work on them constantly, I could feed the Dwarven nation. Not our fortress, mind you. I could feed the multitudes. Dwarven farming is so insanely overproductive that the real trick is not keeping your dwarves alive from starvation. The trick is making sure you don't produce so much food that you drown in it. We really didn't have much. We're only a year in now. And this isn't farming plants here. This is forested forage plants, mostly. If I look at my kitchen and I look at my stocks here, most of these are not our plants. They're plants that we have gotten from the surface, with the exception, of course, the one exception being the plump helmets. Now, grazing land, now you're on to something. Grazing land is a great reason to use uh, an underground giant space like that. Yes, absolutely. We do need a lot of grazing land. We have some. This is probably enough for our needs immediately by far, but long term, this won't work for us. We're going to need to deviate this up, have the birds in their own pasture space so they can do their nest box dance, have the grazers in an area where there's grazing land for them specifically. And while there's some here enough to go around, this won't sustain everybody long term. I can't raise 50 pigs and 50 dogs and 50 cats and 50 sheep in this area without having to get trampled to hell. So we're going to have to spread them out. And that area we're creating down there actually would work for that. We'll need to muddy it once, either intentionally or accidentally, by spreading water across the ground once and then having it drain away. The water will leave behind mud, as it did in this hallway earlier when we were draining that water, remember? Muddy cave moss and a dusting of mud means I could actually farm in this hallway if I wanted to. It is now considered arable farmland. And it will grow, not that it's had a real chance yet because it's not been very long, but there's flora fungus. Dense flora fungus acts like grass, so we could graze in this hallway if we wanted to as well. Yep. Food production is not a problem for Dwarf Fortress the moment you understand that it's not. Once you have a grasp on how to produce food, producing it is not hard. Producing it in overabundance is not hard. Having your dwarves, so let's talk for a moment. Let's real dope talk here. We have one food job queued. Prepare lavish meal. This uses 4 ingredients. I won't use anything less than 4 ingredients because, frankly, there's no point. If your dwarves are so hard up for food that you can't make lavish meals, you might as well throw in your hat now because that shit has really gotten bad. Really gotten bad. Like, I mean, if you're eating kitten biscuits, that's really bad. Like, everybody jokes about it from the old days, but in the modern era, it is. I don't like to use words like trivial to produce an overabundance of food, but it really kind of is. Um, a little foraging and a little farming go a long way, and if you start adding in hunting or trapping or uh, fishing, good lord, you'll drown. The food will just pour out of your ears. We are going to end up with an overabundance despite only harvesting 2 surface crops in our own farmland. So, to make matters worse, photo number, I guess I should cover that while I was. I talked about it briefly initially when I set it up, but it's worth mentioning it here again. We have those 8 farm plots here, 5 by 5, 8 farm plots. These top ones here are solely for. Let me double check to make sure I set them up correctly. These should be rope reeds and sunberries. Yeah. So that's going to start producing our cloth and our best booze because rope or sunberries is the best we've got in terms of booze at the moment. If we can get whip vines, which we don't have any right now, but if we can get whip vines and brew them, I will happily use whip vine clothing and material because it's better. But if we can't get it, we can't get it. Don't believe we formally designated this as a dormitory, which we need to do. Now, I don't really want dwarves sleeping here long term, so we need to fix that problem as well. But for now, this is also our hospital. We've got plenty of storage, and if we don't, I'll add more, but I like to boost that just a little. Realistically, barring some huge major super disaster, that's probably more supplies in our hospital than we're going to use in one go for a long time. But your triage doctors don't have time to go digging in the stockpile if you're short. So I'd rather have a little extra, so I double it, and if I need more storage, I'll put more in. Got to redo these. My hope is that by digging out this odd little diagonal here, we're going to maximize aquifer flow. You're here to spend your rest of your lives in servitude to my grand fortress utopia. So we are going to do that, but not the way you're thinking. We're going to set up a whole lot of forages, and designate each forage for one dwarf. They all get their own forage, and then we're going to make coins. Lots of coins. And we're not going to keep the coins. We're going to melt the coins back down, but we're going to make coins. Every dwarf in our fortress will end up being a metal crafter, and at the same time, they'll all be producing metal for us, and producing value for us, and producing one type of item that I can sell easily en masse. We are going to use aquifer flow, we hope, and I'm noting here that we're being hopeful. We do not know that this will actually work. I'm not sure that we can do it. But this aquifer is aggressive enough, I'm thinking, that we might be able to use it to power our well. Although it's a light aquifer, and normally I would not think that we could do this, we had a lot of flooding, and my hope is that if we can pack the flooding into a tight space, we can make the aquifer work for us. And if not, well, then fuck it, I'll hook it up to the string. Unless it's been fixed, there are still a few items where you can put an item in under certain circumstances and get more out of it than you put in. Coins, giant axe blades, there's a handful of others where if you put in 3 bars, you're getting 3.5 bars back or 4 bars back. But coins occupies a special place in my heart for a good reason. It allows me to demonstrate macros, which I highly recommend. Maybe. Maybe. I won't say no, actually. It's possible. If it were done properly, you could probably have the single tiles of water dropping through a grate at the bottom without a problem. There's not, technically this is all damp. See, it tells me this is all aquifer, and my hope is if we excavate enough of this with diagonals that we will get a reliable single tile of water As before, we now have a breach, so breaching protocol now applies. We immediately turn all of these staircases off, turn the ones that are left into up staircases, and then let the dwarves finish out that staircase. Now, once they have finished out this bottom here, we have one staircase that breaches the caverns and must be replaced. No holes into the caverns unless you mean it. The caverns are crazy, and you never put your dwarf in crazy. Cancel's fish was standing on ice. Fell in pond, gained swimming XP. That's what it really says there. See, now it's worth noting that the stream actually is flowing out the far end, but the stream itself doesn't actually have enough flow to sustain itself. It's actually dying back along the path here as water flows off. In theory, you could build a couple of tiles of stone here to kind of trim down the output from the stream and therefore bottle it up a little better. I do not have any interesting domesticated animals. We have only a year in, so we haven't had a chance to actually start much of a domestication program yet, to speak of at all. Okay, so let's see here. Now that the staircase has been dug out, we replace it with a simple block staircase. Problem solved. As soon as the dwarves construct this, we are once again sealed off from the caverns. I'm not saying you have to stay sealed off indefinitely. I like to get cavern access. I like to give my dwarves a place to go out there and hunt cavern animals, or my military a chance to go out there and practice on cavern animals. Is there a way to safe way to force non-lethal swimming training? Yes, but it's slower than hell. There are other ways that are probably much more involved and may still be safe. I don't know, but there's a simple way that's safe. It's just not perfect, and it will involve some job cancellations if you employ it. Typically, you will want to, and we do not yet have, a trench at the entrance to your fortress that all your dwarves must walk through when entering the fortress. This gives them a bath and forces any contaminants on them to fall to the bottom of the trench, where they are rendered harmless and will not stick to anyone else. But if you take that trench and instead of filling it with the traditional 3 by 3 of 7 water, and you fill it with all 3 of 7 water except for one tile, which you allow to grow to a 4 of 7, you now have a roaming 4 of 7 that floats around in your bathing trench that everybody wades through when they go in. Remember, 3 of 7 is walking, 4 of 7 is swimming. So that tile of 4 of 7 will start wandering around, and there's basically like a 1 in 6 chance as a dwarf walks through that the 4 of 7 tile happens to wash through the tile where he is. And if it does, he's swimming for the moment that that tile is over him, and he will swim out the far side. Now, if he screws it up, well, it's going to wash away here in a second, and the moment it's not on him anymore, he's now walking, so he'll stand back up and walk out. The problem is swimming aborts jobs. So, yes, you can force dwarves to swim. Yes, you can make it relatively non lethal. Yes, you can make it safe. No, you cannot make it 100% convenient that I'm aware of. But if there's a method out there that you come across where dwarves can be made to swim without interrupting their labors and without having to force them into boxes or something, by all means, let me know. There we go, and now we're sealed off from the caverns again. Yay. The quarry continues to grow. The reality is that I can't think that swimming is typically very useful for your average dwarf. I'd like to train all my dwarves to swim at least competently, but the reality is if there is such a flood in my fortress that dwarves need to swim, something has gone so wrong as to defy all reasoning. Fortresses do not spontaneously flood. If there's a flood, it's because we did it wrong. Double back through here and make sure, if I can, that I don't see anybody needing another guild hall. Generally speaking, I do not use the caverns in a grand, everybody can go visit them and go on walkabout sense. The caverns are, at best, a hostile area that I make partial advantage of. The only people who should normally be in my caverns are military dwarves who've been sent there to kill something, hunters, if I'm not being careful about my access control, because I normally don't allow free access to the caverns at all times. So they'll complain that they can't hunt stuff in the caverns a lot of times if I don't open them back up. Typically, though, by the time I'm into the caverns and having dwarves in them, I'm no longer hunting. We are hunting now, you'll notice. We've still got some hunters out there on the surface. We haven't yet seen, other than thieves, any sort of invaders yet. That time is probably rapidly approaching its end. Rapidly, rapidly. At the point where it does, I'll pull the guys off hunting detail and they'll probably become the first core of our Marksdorf squad. But the caverns proper? No. If I'm going to have dwarves in the caverns, it's a section of caverns that I've literally walled off and made into a park, a reserve, basically. Um, if, for example, your caverns happen to have cave spiders, lots of cave spiders, and I don't mean the giant cave spiders, I mean the little vermin cave spiders, I would seriously look at walling a chunk of it off. Um, if the cave spiders keep spawning in there, like they should, um, then the section you've walled off becomes a free, cheap, easy access to silk that's safe enough for your dwarves to use en masse. But when I say walled off, remember, you've got to wall off all of the levels of the cavern. If it's 5 floors high, you've got to have a wall 5 floors high. So no fair getting half the cavern walled off and then complaining when the forgotten beasts walk over the top of the wall and eat your dwarves anyway. Ah, Have Mark's dwarves on fortifications been fixed? You remember them always jumping off walls to bash people with their crossbows. And so they do. But here's the catch. We're not going to give them the option. We're not going to give them the option. We are going to invite our Mark's dwarves to take up station on a point overlooking the entrance corridor, and then we're going to fucking lock them in with their ammunition. There's no way out. You can't go anywhere. Can't jump off the fortifications if we don't give you a way to get there. But for the most part, don't give them a simple, convenient path, and the problem will mostly fix itself. You wanted to shoot goblins, buddy. We're going to let you. We're going to let you shoot goblins till the cows come home. We're going to make you keep shooting goblins till the cows come home. The reality is that we can prevent this by having doors at the entrance to our fortress that are far enough in that the dwarves are inside our fortress and the wagon doesn't use them. Now, I just screwed it up for this one now that I'm thinking about it, because I think our wagon will have to go far enough in that we can't put doors ahead of where the wagon is, which means we can't put doors ahead of all the public spaces. It's kind of an issue. We did this in a hurry and didn't think it through very clearly. But that's okay. It's all right. Better next time. I have walled off sections of the cavern, so let's talk about trapping for a moment. I have used trapping. I don't recommend it. It's a pain in the ass in the current version. It provides almost nothing of any significance, and until that's changed, I wouldn't bother. When I refer to trapping, I'm typically not referring to the labor, at least not normally. I probably have been referring to the labor all this time. Normally, if I'm talking about trapping for food production, what I'm talking about is building a windmill collector full of cages. A windmill collector is basically a plus sign with no center tile. So there's a hollow center tile where things can pass through it. And then, like one of those old, like a mandala or a, what do they call those things? Made one in art class when I was about second grade. There's a little yarn thing you make where you're winding yarn about on popsicle sticks. And the gist is that you're going to do something very similar with traps. You're going to go up to the surface, for example, say over here somewhere, near the fortress, but not too far away, and you'll build a plus sign out of walls with no center tile, and then fill the area between the arms and the center with traps. Regular old cage traps. Nothing fancy, no blades, not trying to kill anybody here. Just a couple of walls that focus all the migrating animals down into that center tile. And what you end up with is effectively a four-way funnel into cage traps. When the animals migrate through, they will tend to do it in this sinusoid wave pattern, up and down from one side to the other, up and down from one side to the other as they wander through the map. If they hit one of your pinwheels, one of your cage trap areas, their pathfinding will say, oh, if I just go through the center of this, it will push them into the center, they will go through the center, and they will hit cage traps along the way. You will rack up a huge number of wild animals doing this. For domestication purposes, if you're trying to domesticate all your animals, that's the easiest way to catch animals en masse. You can set them up and shoot them later, or drop them off a pit, or there's all kinds of ways to prepare them at that point. Don't make a huge number of them. It goes through cage traps wildly. If it's too far from your fort, it goes through cage traps wildly. You'll have a squad of 12 or 15 animals come through, and you're going to nail 8 or 10 or 12 of them. So all of those cages have to be hauled in. All those cages have to be replaced. Now, the good news is it does act as a sort of defensive mechanism to help you with goblins who will wander through the center in the same fashion. Even though they're not wandering through your map, they will often see the sections through the center as being the shortest path and cage trap the shit out of themselves. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's probably easier than trying to hunt long term by virtue of its relative safety. You're only going to go up on the surface and exchange the traps when there's a safe time to do it. You're not just going to be up there when the ambush shows up. Normally. Normally. Remember, all surface access is by definition a certain degree of risk. There's nothing you can really do about that. And it's now time to excavate that one tile of stuff and remove these walls that we built. So let's get that done. Ah, you're wrong. You don't have to forbid them. What you need to do is use a burrow. They'll give you a complaint about not being able to go change the cage, but they won't actually go try to do it in the middle of the siege. The complaint is useful because it will tell me that my fortress is still sealed up. The burrow will keep them safe. And it requires like a couple of button presses once it's set up to get everybody goes inside. They will spam your reports. I will tell you right now, that's a given. You are going to have job cancellations on anything on the surface or in the caverns or wherever else you don't allow them. And they will righteously tell you about it. But I don't care because it's two buttons to get everybody indoors at that point. Now, I don't notice too much lag, I confess. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. It's always possible Toadie's done something with the pathfinding, I admit. But generally speaking, the burrows have worked in my favor. Now, let's do something we haven't done yet and get the rest of the bedrooms done. Well, there's a limit to what your modern super rig can really get out of Dwarf Fortress. Since it is CPU bound to a single core, you cannot get the full performance of a modern PC out of it for Dwarf Fortress. In fact, to a degree, one of the better ways you could theoretically run Dwarf Fortress if you were so inclined would be to go back and get one of those old, two or four core rigs, rig it as high an overclock as you can get on the damn thing, and oh no, these are fantastic looking bedrooms. You don't want to know why these are fantastic looking bedrooms? Because every single tile of wall around every single one of these bedrooms can be engraved. These bedrooms are 4 tiles deep. Every single one of them will have 11 tiles. I don't know if these two out here will count, but I don't care. It doesn't matter. They'll have at least 11 tiles of engravings, not counting the floor, in addition to their bed, cabinet, chest. Dwarves don't care how much space they get. This isn't RimWorld. They care about, do they have the necessities and how valuable is my bedroom? RimWorld cares about space. Dwarf Fortress doesn't. 1 by 5 bedroom with the door on the fifth tile and the bedroom way at the back, and you got to climb over your chest and your cabinet to get to it every night. Dwarves don't care. Coffin hotels work just fine by dwarves. So the good news is this is 80 dwarves worth of space. The bad news is we have 96 dwarves. Well, let's see. What do we like? He's away from traditions. Produced a masterwork. Wanted to pray and can't. Come on, guys. I got every one of these things you can do. Unable to acquire something. Need to produce more goodies. Well, why can't you pray there, guy? Distracted by unmet needs. Unfettered after staying occupied. So he is too busy. What are you doing? You are a mason. That's why. We probably have you making everything under the sun. Actually, we probably have you moving stonework for the. I know what you're doing. I know what the problem is. Uh, Toady needs to acknowledge that if dwarves are going to become deeply, deeply depressed and unhappy about their lives being, their needs being unmet, that their needs need to be higher priority. The notion that the player can micromanage the labor to the degree necessary to ensure that every dwarf gets the chance to go and do all the praying that they need to do seems backwards with the way that it is implemented currently. At the very least, the player needs to have the if they're not going to make their labors their needs higher priority. That is to say, currently what bothers me is they'll go warship. And very clearly, the warship is higher priority than the other jobs because they will happily go warship even if they have other jobs to do. I mean, they do. But I mean, here's a hauler right here. Here's a hauler. You're telling me that this hauler doesn't have anything in the entire fortress to haul? There's nothing anywhere that needed to be hauled? So very clearly they are taking time out to do these things. I mean, I only have or two masons here, right? But I had lots of mason tasks. They could be storing stone if nothing else. Yet they're still finding time to do these meditations and prayers and worships, and yet it never seems to quite meet their needs. And I think this is down to some dwarves can't be saved, which is a funny thing to say in context of a religious discussion as this is, but some dwarves can't be saved. If you imagine every dwarven trait as being a spectrum from 0 to 100, just for the sake of argument, 0 meaning you completely, absolutely abhor this thing, and 100 meaning you absolutely must have it at all times. Um, some dwarves are going to be 100 in religious devotion to every god that they have, and probably a few that you didn't have. And they are going to effectively end up as completely busted dwarves that cannot be saved from anything because they need to spend so much time worshipping their pantheon that they can't actually function anymore. They are literally non functional. They can't get anything done without failure to meet their religious needs. This similar phenomenon, I suspect, happens across the board for a wide variety of needs. And it doesn't require that they be a 100, I don't think, to reach the level where they're busted. I think that you're going to start to see problems out at the extremes without necessarily needing to be at the extreme. Because it doesn't take much for a slightly more than religious dwarf to have 4 or 5 gods that he's now slightly more than average religious to. And that's a lot of time investment. Even if your temples are stacked, he's got to spend a lot of time in the temples. If you then tack on the need to travel to food and drink and not carry those things with you, it starts to be travel time plus personal needs is non-functional dwarf, is how I think we're reaching the busted point. Now, as long as your fortress is reasonably well laid out, I think that you're not going to see the problem, for the most part, across all dwarves to an extent that it poses a major issue. Some dwarves are going to be unsavable. Most dwarves are going to be okay, but not real happy about things. Just sort of okay. It used to be the case that we could meet dwarven needs so well that we could effectively keep them in a dwarven utopia. No. Zones are, well, not in any fortress that's laid out sensibly. I, I can't say no if your entire fortress takes up no more than a single zone's size, a zone which I think is 31 by 31 currently. If your entire fortress takes up no more than a 31 by 31 square, if everything takes place in that 31 by 31 square, then you could make the entire fortress into a religious area. Now, I can posit, but would never attempt, that you could do this with any fortress, hypothetically. And if you do it, you are the craziest motherfucker that has ever existed. Because here's what you're going to run into. You're going to have to make a temple for a temple zone that covers every square of your fortress that you care about. And you're going to have to do one of those for every god you have and every denomination you have. I think I have 8 gods and 6 denominations, so that's 14 temple zones for every tile in my fortress, each dedicated to a different god. But wait, there's more. You have to get the value of those internal temples up high enough that they qualify, or at least maybe it's one of them, but at least one of them, maybe all of them, at least one of them, up high enough that they effectively become the top tier guild hall or cathedral or tavern or whatever, right? And they then have to spend all their time in the one that they care about. And I'm not sure there's not a bug there. Toady would have to convince me of that because I've never tested it and I have no idea how I would. If you have 2 temples, both devoted to the same god, one is a good temple that the super value, and the other is the barely a shrine temple that you just sort of carved out of rock and left there. It's just big enough to qualify as a shrine, right? If you have a super religious dwarf in a large enough denomination that they now require the larger temple, if they use the smaller temple, are they mad? Do they use the smaller temple? And the answer to that question would determine whether this whole 14 temple zones per fortress tile made any sense at all. Because if they'll only use one of them at random, and it has to be the one that's of the high enough value, you're fucked. You build one temple to each god because that's the only way you're ever going to get them all high enough to have that kind of value, other than some bizarrely crazy fortress where you have a giant open space filled with statues and whatever, because the entire fortress is a giant super temple. It's it's ludicrous. It's maddening. There's no way you would ever do it. You could theoretically make a DF hack tool that would do it for you. I give you my blessing. Go forth and code, my son. Um, But that said, I'm not fully convinced that this system or set of systems, I guess I should say, because it's the entire set of systems. The guild hall is now applied, and the tavern now applies the same way. All of these systems, I'm not sure they work as advertised. I'm just not. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced we've fixed alcohol poisoning yet. I'm betting we still haven't. And if we haven't fixed alcohol poisoning, this will be yet another year where I'll assign a tavern keeper and some performers, and we're going to have people drop dead in the tavern because they've been overserved. Not overserved to the point of sloppy drunk, not overserved to the point of brownout where they're sort of staring off into space. Overserved to the point that they go comatose and stop breathing. And I don't just mean the humans. Now, maybe it's only some of them that are getting their religious needs met because only some of them go and pray and the others are too busy all the time. But once my fortress gets mature, it has been my experience that I can knock off all but a handful of labor. Basically, give my dwarves a holiday. Suspend or kill all my job queue stuff. Give them all a holiday. Let the hauling wind up and finish because the stockpiles get full. Then there's just a handful of hauling to be done amongst, 100 dwarves or 150 dwarves or whatever. And they still don't get religious needs met reliably, is my experience. Too busy talking, too busy eating, too much travel time. I'm not sure. But again, that's my experience. It's been a year. Let's see if it's changed. Let's see. It would be nice if so let me propose something different. Something that would allow us to kind of bypass any bugs at the same time it's helping to build some lore. Let's do high holy days. Every god is going to have, I don't know, let's call it 4 high holy days a year, one per season or whatever. Your god of shadows hates the summer because that's when the light's on, but he loves the winter. So he's got a moody festival that happens during the summer, and he's got a happy festival that happens during the winter, and he's got some change of seasons festivals that happen during the spring and the fall, whatever. Okay, so this is our god of shadows, right? Now, on the high holy day, everybody that worships that god to whatever minimum degree is necessary. That doesn't have to be I made a prayer one time. Maybe it's I'm regular devoted person, not super devoted, just I go on the regular basis to services or whatever. Okay, fine, great. On a high holy day, that guy stops doing labor and goes and does his self-flagellation or his uh, immersion ceremony or whatever the hell it is that he's got to do, his ritual cannibalism. Fine. Let that satisfy religious need immediately and let it be lasting for a degree. And if the problem persists that we're not getting religious needs met, what do we have to do to get there for a given case? I hate to say I'd like to see numbers on this. I hate to say I want to see the numbers. Don't go there, Photo Numbra. Don't go there with me. So, uh, I don't want to say things like I want to see the numbers, but God, I want to see if there's one of those dwarven scientists out there, one of those folks who has more time and patience and focus and sense than I do, who has sat down with DF Hack and actually crunched the numbers on I have a dwarf or 5 dwarves in a sealed environment where one of them is super religious and one of them is only slightly religious, and I set up my stockpile in my tavern and my temple X number of squares apart to a reasonable distance, not to be one tile. Do they get their needs met, or are they requiring giant chunks of time off every month? And I think what it comes down to is we're getting caught, we're getting hooked on this thing right here. Have you watched how fast dwarven time passes relative to how fast things actually happen in your fortress? 221, we've got one guy moving a boulder. Let's follow a guy. Oh, I've got a migrant wave I've got to sort. Let's do that first. Now, if everybody's been sorted properly in my fortress, they'll all have this two type job title to let me know what they are. If we have an excess of logs, I will burn some for charcoal. Forts take a long time for dwarves to get around in them. Like time passes unrealistically fast vis-a-vis travel. Like your fortress is a day apart kind of thing. The only way that it makes sense that for time to pass this fast is if you are literally jamming stuff into the same room kind of thing. Like most fortresses I've ever seen would be days from one or would be, half a day it feels like from one to the other. We've crossed a day already. We ticked a day while we were talking there, and I had it on pause for most of this time because I've been, you know, messing with things. Time flies in dwarf fortresses. I kind of wish there was a day marker in here, so we could see how many of these cancellation announcements are coming in over the course of a day. These things take so long vis-a-vis real time that I think the problem comes in when your dwarf is assuming that things will happen on a somewhat realistic normal guy scale. I'll get to go to my religious services once a week, so 4 times a month. I'll get to have my 2 meals a day apparently because dwarves apparently only eat twice and drink my 4 drinks a month. Um that's cool. But you notice how we're only eating 4 drinks in a month and 2 meals in a month? I'm betting we didn't set our religious need to only be net once a month. Or if we did, it just seems like they're not getting enough credit for it at that point, or it's wearing off faster than it should, I think, for most dwarves. I mean, we set this engraving up to be done when we dug this entrance in the first year, and here we are almost through halfway through the second year, and they've still got at least a third of it to do. These guys have been up here a while, and I don't have a problem with that. There's a lot of gods, so they could be going through the cycle, where they're doing this god, then that god, then the other god. That's fine. And again, I don't have a problem with them having a religious need. That's cool. Lore it up. But at the same time, I'm concerned about the impact on dwarven labor. And maybe this is my modern materialistic capitalist upbringing talking. But yo, man, get to work. And it's really not the problem that they get to work. It seems like the work gets done. It just feels like they don't get the work done and still feel like they're meeting their religious needs. And good God, I'm not running a slave driver camp here. I'd rather they took the break. There needs to be what we need to do, I think, long term is we need to go in here and say, there needs to be a new category of standing orders here where, like zone orders, where it says prefer regular work, prefer religious work, prefer guild work, prefer whatever. Put a little priority chart in there where if it's an emergency, I can move work tasks ahead of religion and guild and eating if it takes that. But right, I mean, let me click a button and turn off all dwarven labor. Today is the equivalent of dwarven sabbat or Sabbath or whatever. We're all going to just take a day off. Nobody lifts a fork. Whatever. My point is, give them a chance, give the player some control over it, or turn down the need for it. I'm not saying eliminate it, but turn it down to where it's more reasonable. I have a lot of haulers. You cannot tell me that the hauling labor that this fortress has produced is so great that it's chewing up all my haulers, that they can't swap in and out. I don't buy it. I don't have that much labor going on. There's a lot of people up here praying for me to be doing that much labor. And you can't tell me that each and every one of these guys is going to be a crafter that's not being used. Some of these guys are going to end up being haulers. I think some dwarves have a high need to work, and if that dwarf has a high need to work and a somewhat high religious need, his religious need is going to get screwed. I think some dwarves have a super high religious need and a high need to work, and they're really going to get screwed because the work, I think, is taking precedence in the priority system, and their religious need is never going to get met. Not because they're doing too much work, but simply because they will have a hard time meeting it normally, I think. I'd like to see at some point, I'd like to see some hard numbers on how often a dwarf must exercise some religious ceremony, whether it's meditation or praying or how that affects them. I'd like to see some numbers. And I know that we're all this is Dwarf Fortress and we don't like to put the numbers out there, but it feels like something doesn't add up. Did you realize 4 days had gone by in the fortress while we were talking there? 5 now. Okay, what's this? This has got to be in the. Oh, they're complaining about the logs in the river. So this is annoying, but you have two you have two solutions here. One is you can let them try really hard to get these out, and maybe the river will die back like it did earlier, and this will be down low enough that they'll come rushing in here and grab them all. It's possible. It's possible. But it's not likely. So typically what I will do is go back through all these ponds with all these logs that are laying in them and just mark them forbidden. And that That should stop that problem. Can't store items in the stockpile if they're not accessible. That's another example of a need that's really hard to meet, but you can get around it to a degree. If you give them the option and they have nothing to do and they're in a squad, a lot of times they'll wander down to the guild hall or the barracks and do a little training. But to get them to train reliably, in most cases, you end up either having to micromanage labors to a degree that I consider maddening. In the "will drive you nuts, I can't believe you do it on your own head be it" sense. Or you force them to have a month once a year where they do military service. And that military service does not have to be anything other than training, but it forces them to train. And you'll probably have to do it 3 times a year or 4 times a year with a couple months between and then some training. And it's only going to partly satisfy the problem. There's no way to set up the equivalent of the National Guard in the US where a week or two a year and then weekends every other couple of weeks you're doing training. You can't force them to that fine a degree. The schedule system doesn't allow it. You can't. So you end up having to put them in a squad and draft the squad whenever you want them to be training, and then leave it on for a couple days and undraft the squad to go back to regular labor. There's there's another DF hack tool you could theoretically build right there. My children, if you are feeling your code oats and want to demonstrate your prowess, assuming a squad and designate those squads in the list. For each squad in the list, every 2 days, turn military service on and then back off. So for 2 days, they're in the military and need to train. For 2 days, they're out of the military and can't. For 2 days, they're in the military and need to train. For 2 days, they're out of the military and can't. Figure out a system that would automatically draft a squad in that fashion and go to it. Then just let me set the squads up in a list. And I think you could theoretically do that. You could micromanage it to that degree, but I think you're going to run into the dwarven travel time problem. 2 days in the service, by the time they finish what they were doing, um, get their equipment if they're not carrying it, get to where they need to be to train, start training, day's over, got to go back. Add in sleeping, eating, religious services. Like I said, I really would like to see some numbers on what it takes for a dwarf of a given religious bent or military bent. If all their traits are neutral, if all their traits are 50, they're perfectly average across the board. What does it require for that dwarf day in a month, in a year, in a day to meet their needs? How does that change if they have 5 gods they worship instead of one? How does it impact them if they have 5 guilds they're part of because they have lots of skills trained? Five guilds they're part of instead of just one. How does it impact them if they have, like I said, I just I hate to ask to see the numbers. It's Dwarf Fortress. We don't do numbers here, but it has never felt like the job and needs system is balanced against the reduced scale necessary for dwarves to exist, is how I think I would phrase it. Welcome aboard. And I don't know that. Maybe it has. Maybe Toady has volumes of test data, reams of examples where he's gone through it with a fine tooth comb and proved it extensively and exhaustively. But I'm not sure I buy that one either. Fresh raw hides will be delivered here for our tanners. Now, clearly it's working to some degree, or some dwarves are less needy than others, perhaps might be a better way, I think, to put it, because you can see here just from my idealized readout down here, and this is no longer as reliable as it used to be, but some of my dwarves are edging up. Most of them won't. And I think the problem is, to a degree, I'm asking for a mechanical demonstration, if you will, that this system works in a sort of mathematical sense. When I obviously that really shouldn't be how a, let's call it, pseudo realism simulator works. But I don't know. 5 more days or 6 more days passed since Bai showed up. You know, that's a week's worth potentially of religious services that somebody potentially needed to have. And I doubt very much that they had it. Well, if I'm talking, if I push the button, and God help me, I sometimes hold it down while I'm trying to gather my thoughts, it'll audio duck the music. At least I think it should. Can you hear the music in the background? Might help if I turned it on, I suppose. I'm hoping that's a little better and you can actually hear the audio now. Looks like somehow OBS got the device turned off. All right. So yeah, that's my dime store tour on the subject of needs, I guess is what I would say. Let's get this walled off and pastured up properly. Well, it felt a little more aggravating, actually, than satisfying. Every one of these walls you see in here is not a smooth wall. It is a quick, rough, wooden or block wall that we jammed up in a big damned hurry to keep from flooding. Um, This area here to the left of the dining room is literally our first attempt after we had walled this up to go underneath the area that we knew to be aquifer to see if it would actually drip down on us from above and verify that yes, indeed it would. And yes, it was really, really aggressive still. So we literally walled it up. And it had no problem filling it up. No problem. So my thinking is, we're hoping, I'm going to dig out a couple of tiles of the aquifer on a couple of different levels, leaving one level between each one, with the hope that since it's checkerboarded, more tile is exposed and has a chance. Yeah, that was no fun. Now keep in mind, we're doing this while we're trying to get a fortress up, so literally my guys are sleeping in the mud while we try to get our aquifer under control. And for a light aquifer, it's surprisingly aggressive. I mean, really, surprisingly aggressive. This is literally just a stairwell up through the aquifer, and we're getting water into the well. It's a trickle at this point, but water is definitely getting there. My suspicion is if we dig out a couple more floors that way, checkerboard them, you can't do it floor by floor because... Actually, you can. If you're following the same pattern, it won't matter. Never mind, it won't matter. So we'll checkerboard a few, just like this one, where there's a checkerboard of tiles around the stairs. And my hope is, with enough checkerboarding, we'll get this same sort of consistent flow out of the aquifer at each level. More flow in than is actually needed to sustain this down to the basement. Because with just one aquifer only partly dug out to the way I want it, we're already getting water in the well.
A Dwarf has gotten an idea and has withdrawn.
Ooh, a withdrawal. So let's talk about mood types for a moment. We've had several possessions, but this is our first secretive mood, where the dwarf withdraws and hides himself away to make his special super secret artifact. He goes all Aule, if you're familiar with the Silmarillion. So, our dwarf is going to do basically just the same thing he did before. He's going to go grab a workshop and go, har har, it's mine. Welcome back, TKR.
I claim this workshop in the name of invention!
And he's got a mason's workshop. Is he off and running? Yes, he is. Huh. Dwarven child missing for a week. Anybody want to bet he was out wandering around the surface? I really should probably have made a burrow faster than this, but I didn't. Shame on me. You know, one of these days I'm going to have to actually write all this stuff down so I can actually remember it when I get in a big rush. Well, maybe not. Remember, I don't have them kept indoors, so it's entirely possible he was up playing on the surface and got snatched. It's also possible he did something silly like wander out onto the ice, got a freeze, and then got a thaw, and then immediately got a freeze right after it. They'll never find him. So, since we've got a mood up, let's do that for a moment. Show Mood is the DF hack tool that I use if I'm confused about what a dwarf wants. Now, I'll be honest. This doesn't happen very much. I'm pretty good at knowing what they want now, and the wiki actually has a breakdown if you want to just read off what they want and translate it directly from the wiki. After you've done it a couple of times, it'll stop bothering you. But if you get confused or you're convinced that you've provided everything he wants, then show mood will tell you. Now, there is one case where it can really get confusing about what a dwarf wants, and that would be if they want 2 of something. Sometimes they'll want item 1, rock boulder, item 2, rough gems, item 3, rock boulder. If there's only 1 boulder in the fortress, he'll stand around saying, I want a boulder, I want gems. I want a boulder, I want gems. But you know for a fact he's already got a boulder. The catch is that what's really going on there is that the boulder display, when he says it, is going on twice as long. It's saying, I want gems, and it lasts for 2 seconds, let's say. And then it says, I want a boulder, and it lasts for 4 seconds. And then it says, I want a gem, and it lasts for 2 seconds. And at that point, you're knowing that he needs 2 of them, or 3 of them, or some number of them. It's possible that you can get them to require several of the same item. Forbidding all the items of a given type in the fortress after your dwarf has gotten something can cause or at least used to, cause all sorts of bizarre effects. So if you waited till he got his metal bar, for example, and then forbid it, and then waited for him to get another metal bar and forbid it, and then waited for him to get another metal bar and forbid it, he would constantly keep resetting to the metal bars and getting new metal bars over and over again, and he would use them all when he was done. This might have been useful earlier for our ceramics worker if we didn't know he was a ceramics worker by virtue of having labeled him, and if we didn't have Dwarf Therapist to point out that yes, he was in fact a ceramics worker and that he was after a ceramics mood. So, in addition to show mood, which you can use through DF Hack, this guy right here, Mouthful, is doing a mood. Mason. And as it happens, he's a Mason. That's his highest moodable skill. Now, possessions versus other types of moods. There are several types of moods, most of which you won't actually see on my stream because I like to keep my dwarves happy. Macabre and fell moods will not be seen here, usually. Possessions will be seen regularly. They're kind of random. You'll get a possession or a secretive mood or... oh, good lord, what is that other kind? There is another kind. But the gist is that possession moods, the dwarf will make the artifact and go back to doing what he was doing. Nothing will really change. With a secretive mood or the other type of mood, their skill will actually go up. So when this guy finishes, he is going to be the best mason in my fortress. He's going to go from a 1 to better than this guy down here with an 8. Wouldn't happen if he was a possession, but he's a secretive, so it will. Is there any chance I'll do some lava engineering? Perhaps not today, and possibly not with this fortress, but yes, at some point during this month I will absolutely cover lava engineering, and if I haven't covered it by the end, you can rest assured that on the 24-hour live stream, I'm going to cover my lava engineering. Specifically, when I say lava engineering here, what I mean is we will demonstrate some rudimentary ways to move lava around for your benefit using minecarts. Not minecarts the way you're thinking of using minecarts. No, there won't be a whole lot of track involved in the way I use minecarts. See, there's this little trick where you can put some minecarts in a room, fill the room with magma, empty the room of magma, wait for the minecarts to cool down a bit, grab the minecarts, take them to where you're going, put them on a minecart stop, which immediately dumps them into a hole. If you dump more than 4 of 7 of lava into a hole, you now have a working magma smelter or whatever that you can put above it. Because it just has to be more than 3. If you get to 4, and it's never going to spread out, and it's never going to evaporate, that's all you need. So you can actually fill a bunch of minecarts with magma, forbid them all, and then slowly and carefully designate each minecart to be taken to minecart stops and dumped into a hole. It's safe to move the minecarts as long as you let the magma chamber cool down. I'm not sure who invented the method. It's not mine. I can tell you right now. I didn't invent it. Nope. Could not tell you. But it does work. I've demonstrated it on stream previously. It's a little fiddly to get set up, but here's the thing. I have forges set up here, right here. Forges and smelters, right in the middle of my fortress. Okay? Now there's two ways I can do this. I can set up fuel using for more forges and smelters, as I have right here, or I can slowly and carefully remove each one, set up a track stop next to the place where I need it, drill a hole down so there's a place to store the magma in this room we haven't dug down here yet. So we've got a room down here we can fill up. We only need to have one tile, remember, that we fill up. A hole, one tile wide, is big enough. In the case of, say, this smelter, I think it is, right here, the only tile that has to actually have magma under it is the one where my X is, the one at the top center of the 3x3. On forges, it's either or both of the center middle, center left, center right, here. So, if you put magma on this floor, and then put that magma forge above it, you're good. So rather than pumping a room full of magma and then putting the forges over it, which I have done in the past, down by the magma sea especially, you can bring the magma up. It's more fiddly, it will take longer. I won't lie to you. These are all true, and they are valid criticisms of the method. But, once it's set up, it's superior to having... Well, in this case, I don't mean piping so much. Since I probably won't go through it, let's talk about what I mean when I say piping. Just for the sake of demonstration, let's jump down to the magma sea somewhere. Oops, too far. And I've moved away from my fortress because the intent is not actually to use this to demonstrate with my fortress how I will do it with my fortress. Let's run down, pretend we're digging our central staircase down to the magma sea, and we've arrived in the middle of this column of rock is great. Let's say we did. Okay, when we dig down one more, we're going to start to get into this semi-molten rock. And right here, I'll discover there's something wrong. We'll hit semi-molten rock, which means we bypassed the magma sea. So I'll go up a few levels, and I'll start putting out feelers looking for warm stone. And on all of the floors from here down, I will start to get warm stone markers outward a bit, but there'll be some open, fair game stone here in the middle. So what I'll do is, I will designate this area as a forge, okay? And then clear out a chunk of this below it, and punch a hole in the magma, and let it in. And since the forges are built over it, and nothing can get up through that, and the magma is in here, and the magma sea is never going to drain enough, that would be workable. Now that's not ideal the way we're describing it here. Ideal would be to go up a couple of levels where the magma sea is. You'll notice it kind of transitions in. So on this floor, for example, if I were in the right place, say I were right here when I brought my fortress down, and I drill down, I'm going to hit the magma sea and go, oh, I found magma. And I'm going to go up one floor, and I'm going to start carefully digging out, looking around to make sure I don't run into magma. Because when I hit the magma sea, it's going to reveal this area to me and show me where all the magma in my local area is. So I'm going to know what I can dig out safely and what I can't. At which point, all I'm going to do is go up one floor and drill out some holes and put my forges over. But let's say that won't work. Let's say you're on a volcano. You could pretend for a moment that this is the volcano we're looking at here. One slice of the volcano. And my forges are somewhere over here-ish. Because my fortress is not in the volcano, it's adjacent to it, right? Well, let's assume that this is the floor where the magma piping actually has to go. I'll drill a pipe, 3 by 3, not a tiny little narrow 1 by 1. You want a nice big fat pipe. Remember, you got a lot of magma to pull in, so you want to make sure it flows. Lots of magma all at once. 3 by 3, no smaller. And the further you have to go, make sure you got plenty of magma. You shouldn't have to go too far. There is a safe way, and I will no doubt demonstrate it on stream at some point, to tap the magma from the side without risking any of my dwarves. No danger whatsoever to my dwarves. And have the magma flow into a chamber that resides below your magma forges. Perfectly viable, and if you do it properly, once the magma is into the system, it never flows back out. So draining the volcano or using the volcano as a defensive mechanism won't hurt you. But that's not even what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is literally pump a room with minecarts full of magma, drain the magma out, and the minecarts will all have magma in them. It's safe for a dwarf to move a minecart full of magma by hand. They'll pick it up and take it where it needs to go. Full of magma. Perfectly safe. What they'll do, though, is they'll take it up to where my forges are. Somewhere way the fuck up there. Hang on a second. Way the fuck up there. Way the fuck up there. Okay. Up here where my forges are. And I will have drilled out single holes, little pits, in this floor for these guys to reside over. And then what I'll do is I'll remove one fuel-using fortress, set up the track stops, and have a minecart delivered. And the track stop will be set so that it automatically dumps any minecart that arrives on it into the hole. Minecart moves to there. Bang. Done. Emptied. Once the minecart is empty, you just pull it. Done. It's a long system. I won't lie to you and tell you that this is faster than just penetrating a volcano or digging down to the magma sea. In terms of speed of setup, you'd have to be a pretty rocket scientist fast guy about it to get it done faster than either of those methods. But it's going to put my forges right in the middle of my fortress. They're not going to be way over somewhere else. This is my trading space. That's my forges. Literally, we're 3 levels down from the hospital and 4 levels down from the main crafting export area. And I'm going to have magma forges in that space. There are other ways to do it. This is not necessarily the best. This method will work everywhere. No matter how deep your world is, no matter whether you're on a volcano or not, no matter whether you found a magma pipe or not. If you can reach the magma sea, you can pump magma. And if you can pump magma, you can fill a room. And if you can fill a room, you can put magma wherever you want it. Guaranteed. Now, it's worth noting that minecarts contain a 2 of 7 volume, so you cannot put more than 3 minecarts in a single hole. If you want to have a nice, even distribution of 7 of 7 magma, you have to make your holes 2 wide, 2 by 1, in order to fill it up properly. You can, in fact, make it painless with wheelbarrows. Probably should make sure they're metal. Probably should make sure they're metal. And magma-safe metals at that, right? Magma-safe metals. But remember, we're going to do minecarts that way. We have to magma-safe minecarts to do minecarts full of magma, so... But you can certainly do it by hand. I'm fairly certain that's how we did it last time. I'm not sure if wooden wheelbarrows burn or not. I'd have to look. I know. I think it's safe for the dwarf to move the minecart. If I believe, effectively the stuff in the minecart is in a pocket dimension, just like the inside of a cage is a pocket dimension. So animals in cages, as an example, do require food, but do not notice if they're suddenly submerged in water. So, for example, if you take an animal in a cage and you toss it in, it will starve to death, not drown. Hey, he was missing for a week and nobody managed to walk past his bedroom. How'd that happen? No, that's the second one, actually. The first one took place, so I loved this one. This is kind of when I threw my hands up and went, what the hell? So I literally had a dormitory right here, or here, at one point. You know, we've just started the fortress. Oh, sorry, it's right here, square room, right in the middle of the pasture, right in the middle of our pasture to be, right in the middle of all this lovely muck and mud and water. I've got 10 beds. It's all the beds in the fortress are right here. The first vampire death occurs in one of those beds in the middle of the freaking farm area where everybody sleeps side by side and nobody sees a thing. Nobody saw nothing. Four dwarves or five dwarves in the beds at the time and nobody saw nothing. People passing by, nobody saw nothing. That's when I recognized that it's probably not practical to save dwarves from vampires unless you employ alternative means. Now, as I recall, now let me think where to find it at. I'll set these guys back in a second, but for right now, we're nicknaming them to stars. Everybody who's got a meal thought. Used to be the case that you could catch them by looking for drinks, but I think now they get credit for having drank something. Okay, so who does that leave? Nobody, and I don't believe that for a moment. So, something has been changed. Because it used to be you could eliminate anybody who'd had a meal in the dining room, since vampires don't eat. Lol. There we go. Okay. It names him back to himself. That's funny. So you can set them back, but you have to do it individually. Oy vey. Okay, well, we'll give him a sec then. That's interesting. None of these guys who've arrived in the spring of the year 2002 have had a chance to have a meal in the dining room yet. There's only one guy who hasn't had a chance and hadn't had a meal in the dining room that we've had since like the fortress has been set up. Only two guys. Remember, this has been going on for a while now, so there are two folks here who have not had a meal. So I don't want to put the suspicion on anybody, but this guy who's a legendary tracker. Starts to look interesting. But we'll see. Didn't feel anything due to inebriation. Didn't feel anything due to inebriation. Didn't feel anything due to inebriation. He is level-headed after causing trouble. Former member of a lot of groups. Didn't feel anything after eating or drinking. And since we started, all of these other gods have now been added and also need their temples as well, so we've got another run of temples to do. And I need to check because I'm fairly certain Lek the Pristine and Katak Vine Squid both got added after the fact, but I'm gonna have to look. So we have Lek, we have Katak, Taral, Dug, and Sarab. Okay, so no, we've got them all up to that point. We had Met, and then we do the denominations. Okay, so these last few don't actually need to be done because we've got them already. There's Tolan and Met the Foggy, and then we would. And here's Tolan and Met the Foggy. And so these two, Temple of Saints and the Sanctuary of Seducing, need to be redone. Okay. Man, for a minute I thought that was the Temple of B and L, and I was going to say, wow. Val. Ming, Utas, Genleth, Yellow, Scaly, Psycho, Itini, and then a whole bunch of denominations. Okay. We have them all again. They're all covered. Whole lot of praying going on. So let's keep an eye on our manager, because the other guy is Moodin. So I don't figure it was him. This is the other guy who didn't have a meal mood. He's been a little occupied recently. So I don't want to say things like odd man out, but let's just keep an eye on him for a minute. Maybe he'll do something stupid. Or maybe we'll have two vampires and somebody else will give him cover. Apparently we ended up with another log at the bottom of the river there. And let's just keep an eye on our manager again. As I said in the stream announcement, it's beginning to look a lot like Vampire. Now that's interesting. He's eating in his dining room. So maybe that's why he didn't see the didn't have a dining room notification, as he eats in his own private chambers. possible we have a visitor. There's something I hadn't thought. It's possible we have a visitor, and that's why we've only lost two. One once upon a time, and then one more recently. So he's praying to Lek on 318. He had a generic warship task earlier, but he's now praying to Lek. It's now 319, so this is a really long prayer. Back to a generic warship task from praying. We're now 320, so he's now spent more than a day praying. I've got a job waiting for him now still. So now we're seeing how long it takes him for him to break off from his prayer to go attend to the one task I have him doing. 2 days praying. Three days praying. And that's 3 solid days plus change. And remember, he has a job to do. He has tasks to validate. 3 full days of prayer so far. Four full days, 5 full days of prayer now. And I bet you we find out this guy isn't even all that religious. He just has lots of gods he likes. Okay, and now he's got to go get a drink. I'm not going there. Just saying. Let's see if after he finishes his drink, if he goes to his job. But it took him 5 full days. 5 full days to meet his prayer need, and he's now back on to the prayers. Still hasn't been past his office. So, you're asking me about religious needs balancing. This is what I mean. I don't even know if this guy is all that religious per se. But he's literally now taken 8 dwarven days, minus the time he took to get the drink across the hall. 8 dwarven days of nothing but religious fervor here, and he ain't got his job done yet. This organizational activity will branch into specific worship events and take most of a month. Every month. Let's see here. He has now spent 8 days praying and is distracted after not being able to pray to two gods. In 8 days, he has only managed to commune with one god. So when I say that, this is what I think of when I say that things need to be tweaked. And he's back on Warship. So,
Summertime has come.
let's see how my manager has one job to do here and has spent all of his time either in here, or getting a drink, or in here. Getting a drink in here. And yet, despite having spent now almost half a month in religious contemplation and worship here, half a month in the religious contemplation here, still distracted after being unable to pray to his two gods here. Write it down, guys. 3 hours and 30 minutes, so we're nearing the end of our probably well over the time at this point. I should have knocked off already. But folks ask me every year about the religious needs balancing, whether we've balanced needs yet. Whether we balance needs yet? Well, no, I don't think we have. So I mean, you're watching it. I mean, what more does this guy need? If you're going to tell me that their speed of meeting their religious need is somehow based around the quality of the shrine, high value shrines meet religious needs stronger. Okay, I'll buy that, but you know, what do you do for that fortress when you're starting out? Okay, so 4-4, 4-4. He's now been at this for 16 days, more than half a month. More than half a month, where the only time he spent out of the temple is for grabbing a drink at the barrel. That to me is not working the way it should. I'm not saying that dwarves should have no religious preferences. I'm not saying that. I actually kind of like that they do. It makes them a little more, if you will pardon my expression, humanistic in that sense. But this is not mechanically functional. And it applies to all needs, I suspect, not just religious needs. Dwarves now have a panoply of needs that they have to meet. And they have to balance them all. And that's not happening. It's another economy. It's like the economy that was implemented originally, where dwarves would have to pay for their rooms and they'd earn money for the work they were doing. But that meant nobody earned any money for hauling the stuff in the fortress, so nobody hauled anything because you couldn't keep a dwarf happy and sheltered if he was a homeless bum doing all the labor moving stuff around in the fortress. So all the teamsters in your fortress were all homeless bums, and your metalsmith is living in a palace but can't make anything because nobody's actually bringing him the materials. And the whole system would just crash. Not like crash, but like economic crash. This is kind of the same problem, I suspect. We're trying to have all these complex needs. We're not meeting them. We're not thinking about them as a mechanical system, as a mathematical system, as a game system. And because we're not thinking about it in that fashion, we are now starting to meet the conflict between what we want to have in our simulation and the expectations of players who are playing the game. That's my... We're colliding there. So I'm going to pause it here because it's the end of the broadcast, and this is a good time to stop since they've given me this wonderful little station break here. Let's take a moment and look at our dwarf and see how religious he is. So there's no particular thing there that we can see. He doesn't like merrymaking, so that's probably why he doesn't get trashed. Hey, thanks, guys. But he's only met one of his two gods' needs. He won't meet the others. I'm wondering if what's happening is either a conflict between... well, what I think is happening is the dwarf is going to meet his need. He's going to a temple, but he's either not going to the right temple, or he's going to a temple and he's praying to that god, but it doesn't meet the religious need for the god he needs. It's praying to the same god over and over again, in essence. He needs to pray to Zeus, but he keeps praying to Hera and can't figure out why it's not making him happy. Or they can simply have religious needs which are simply just absurdly strong, and I'm trying to figure out where that is for this guy. Bear with me here. I thought there was a spot where it told you how devoted they were. This section is the pray and meditate group. All these pray and meditate needs. Every place where it's yellow, we're starting to get into hazard territory. And every place it's orange or red, we're not meeting somebody's needs at all, basically. I have a tavern. I have a temple. I have a temple for every god that's out there. But we're not meeting their needs almost ever. I find it very hard to believe that the small number of jobs I've got is keeping this many people from meeting their religious needs. This isn't a giant fortress. I'm not demanding huge quantities of labor be done. I have backups for everybody on the fortress. My strong suspicion is that the need system is not working the way we think it is, or not working the way everybody thinks it should. Now, here's the problem. I'm analyzing this using a third-party tool. This isn't how Toady looks at the game. This is me using the only tools I have available to me to look at the game. Overall focus. About half my dwarves are somewhat distracted in some way. So this guy's quite content, and yet he's one of these categories applies to him. This guy is badly distracted. Badly distracted. I don't think it shows me it here. That's what I was hoping it did, but it does not. The stuff I'm looking for is not here, but he's badly distracted for not meeting a need. Can we do this in reverse? So what's odd is I know for a fact that we had our... Hang on a minute. Hit enter. Look at our units again. Our manager. So something's not lining up here, and I don't know if it's the tool or Dwarf Fortress or... He is distracted. He is untroubled after communing. Distracted, untroubled. The only other possibility I can think of is that once I finally get the temple up, I have to effectively give them a year off to meet their past religious need, and that's what they're doing, is they're effectively trying to catch up from the months where I didn't have a fortress, so there was no temple. But that doesn't seem to make sense for all the folks who came in after the fact. I mean, this guy, sure, yeah, okay, he's one of my starting 7. But not all these guys are. Some of these are 201. Some of these guys just arrived. So I'm curious, if you all have heard of a solution to this, if there's a fix out here, I'm all ears. But I see all this constant distracted by being unable to. And as one of those folks who likes to, and you know, not be with friends and not be with family, I can't fix those. There's nothing I can do about them. Their friends and family don't live here. Craft object? Yeah, I can fix that a little bit. But just thinking there's some bending that's going to have to happen before that's going to be where it needs to be. All right, so let's pause here, since we have a siege, and I'm going to have to deal with that next time. Now, while that's saving, anybody got any questions for me? Anything you want to know? Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And we're doing this all the way through the first week of November, November 6th and 7th, where I will do a 24-hour live stream, and I will play Dwarf Fortress that entire time, 24 hours straight. Minus 30 seconds here and there to use the bathroom. All right, so with that in mind, let's see who might be out there for me to sick you fine, fine savages upon. All right, guys, good luck and good night.